Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad that you're here. We have a new story today, of course, and this one's gonna have to do with a witch. I think you're really gonna like it because it coincides with what's going on right now. Like, I swear everybody in my house had the flu, right? Everybody, all three. We had to go to the doctor, get all the medicine, all that stuff. Well, this witch is actually the first witch that was ever put to death in the 13 colonies in the United States. She also kicks off a witch panic that starts in Connecticut, in Hartford, all right? So today's gonna be really fun. I really hope you guys enjoy it. What I do, I put makeup on my face while I'm doing this, just to kind of, give me something to do. And then I'll just tell you guys the story and all that fun stuff. So if you like that, please hit that subscribe button. We talk about all different kind of witch trials, the dark history of witches, and native history as well. And so I really appreciate you guys being here, and let's go ahead and get this party started. Okay, so today's story is about a lady named Alyse. Her name was Alyse Young. Actually, that's who we're going to start with because she's the one that kind of kicks off the whole entire witch panic that is Connecticut / Hartford during this time. Okay, she was born in 1615 and she was married to a man named John. His last name was Young, hence where she got her last name, and they have one child. Okay, and the child's name also is Alyse. Now, during this time, there was sickness going around. You got to think, we're in the colonies. They don't know much about sickness or things like that, but they do know that their family is dying, and they're very upset about it. Anyway, so she marries a man named John Young in 1638. Yep. And during that time, like I say, they only had the one child. But the influenza starts to pop out, okay? And these people really didn't know what to do. I imagine they were probably gathering at people's houses as people passed away, thus spreading the germ. Because I know when, like, my husband and 2 kids both went to the doctor the other week before Christmas, and they all got diagnosed with the flu. I was like, y'all better bring me home some Zofluza or something, because I ain't trying to get this. But they had that back then. They didn't know that keeping people separate, especially with something like the flu, is very, very contagious. And so I've already kind of set the tone for today, and because we all know that there's either a big catastrophe that happens or there's a shift in political power. Well, this whole witch trial is based on the way the influenza spread and who they blamed it on, why they blamed it on them, what these women ended up saying, and things like that. It gets pretty buck wild. Even Alice's own daughter, like 30 years after she's born, even she's put on trial. Yeah, she did not get the old hang, but I'm just saying, she ended up going through a witch trial too. But her mom, of course, Alyse Senior, does not get that great of a chance, okay? It could have been because her husband owned land, like around this river, and he also owned like a little section of these little houses where this one group of family members lived, and they were the Tinkers, okay? And the weird thing about these people is, like, as soon as she got persecuted and was hanged, they never really go into detail about why they hung Alyse. She was the very first one hung in the 13 colonies in the United States. But they never say why, but I think this is why. She had a neighbor, and their neighbor had 4 children. All 4 of those kids ended up passing because of the influenza. And who lives next door? Alyse Young and John Young with their child Alyse, who has not gotten sick. They have one child, not gotten sick. So people are thinking, how come all of our folks are passing, but her kid is okay? She must be doing some witchcraft. I mean, come on, right? So the man that lived next door to them that lost all 4 of his kids, he ends up deciding to dedicate his life and to becoming a minister because he feels like that there's witches about, and he feels like it's witchcraft that is doing these things to the kids and all this other kind of stuff, okay? And so somehow he, along with, we think, the Tinkers, because as soon as Alyse was hung, all the Tinkers left except for one family, and that family stayed for like a year, and then they even did too. So that can't be a too much of a coincidence. So I'm thinking the Tinkers had something to do with it because maybe the Youngs owned the land that they were on. Maybe they weren't getting what they thought they should be getting from the Youngs or whatnot. And so this Thornton guy, he loses his 4 children, and he completely goes nuts and decides to become a minister, which is fine. But he actually becomes friends with Cotton Mather later on. And I know I've talked about him before because he wrote the Magnalia Christi Americana. And in that book, Thornton says that his daughter actually spoke before she died, and this is what she said: "I have been much troubled by Satan, but I find Christ is too hard for him, sin and all." So that's included in the book, okay? Now there's 2 other gentlemen I'm going to introduce you guys to. We got John Wortham. John Wortham is a reverend, okay? And then we have another guy, and I forget his name, Bray Rossier, okay? And what he is, he actually ends up doing the very first, oh God, the word has escaped me. Oh my God, really? An autopsy, okay? Bray Rossier is one of the first people to do he's also the town doctor. He lost a child. John Warham, the minister, lost 2 children. So you can see all these people are starting to get really pissed, right? And so they blame Alyse. Alyse is, of course, the first one to be hanged and all that other stuff. Well, it also says that Thornton's kid, his daughter Priscilla, said something else for the children. Keep a day of humiliation together, that they would get power over their sinful natures. Talking about children. Everybody's like, what sins? What sins is she talking about? But you have to imagine she's on her deathbed with the flu. We all know how we feel when we have the flu. And it's not a great feeling. It's really not. She was hung on May 26th in 1647. She was only 32 years old. They hung her in the town square at Hartford. And she was the very first witch to be hung in the 13 colonies in the United States. And guess what? After that, the death toll rises of the influenza. So you can only imagine what kind of buck wildness is fixing to happen. So her hanging actually started the Hartford Witch Trials. Yes, her hanging did that. I'm going to introduce you guys to our next little witch, because there's going to be quite a few here today. So after the execution of Alyse, people were kind of freaking out, you know. The death toll was rising, the influenza was not getting better, and they were losing a lot of people, a lot of family, you know. It was bad, really, really bad. And so what do? They start pointing fingers at folks. That's all they can do. That's all they ever do, to just point fingers, okay? So it peaked in 1662 because an 8-year-old had gotten sick, I guess, probably with the influenza, but she ended up coming down with pneumonia and bronchitis. Pneumonia back then is just not a good thing. I just don't think you can recover from that back then, but maybe so. They say that she went home and she was fine. She wasn't sick anymore. And then a lady comes by named Goody Arias. I know it sounds familiar, right? And she brings this child some broth. And this child drinks the broth thinking, you know, this will be nourishing for my souls. Broth, chicken broth, vegetable broth, beef broth, whatever it is. She took a turn for the worse after she drank that broth. And she's having fits. She was screaming in pain. She was writhing. She was shaking. She was doing all of these insane things. And nobody knew what was wrong with her. And then she passed away. So everybody said, okay, Goody Arias did magic on her. She was fine when she got home. And now all of a sudden she's in pain. She can't breathe. She's just, you know, and then she dies. This little 8-year-old girl dies. And this, like I say, this would kick off this whole entire deal. That after this, neighbors started pointing fingers at neighbors. You know, we've got Goody Arias over here who ends up going to jail. Then we have Mary Johnson. Okay, Mary Johnson was the first recorded confession of witchcraft in the United States. Okay. And she was just a house servant, okay? You got to know that most of these people are either going to have some kind of higher power, or own a lot of land, or they're just very sick and sickly. And these people are easy to be picked on. So Mary Johnson, yeah, she was the first recorded witch confession. Of course, I'm sure they did some torturing beforehand, you know, as they always so much do. And yeah, oh my God, I love this color. I've never used this color before. It's very pretty. Anyway, so Mary Johnson, when she was, they first got her for theft in 1648, and after torture and interrogation, she confessed to having familiarity with the devil, basically having relations, I guess you could say, with the devil. Having relations with men and the devil, and she confessed to murdering a child. But she did this under torture. So when you're being tortured, you'll do and say anything for it to be stopped. Point blank, period. And that's what a lot of these people back then didn't seem to understand. They were just looking for a scapegoat, as always, and they ended up finding a lot of scapegoats in this instance, unfortunately. But let's go on ahead. So her execution was delayed because she was pregnant during her imprisonment. I don't know if she was married or if it was an illegitimate child or whatnot. But then, of course, she was executed. God, I can't talk today. Executed on June 6, 1650. Now we're going to move on to Catherine Harrison. This is all the same witch trial. The Hartford Witch Trials, the Connecticut Witch Trials, whichever ones you want to call it. This is when it really starts to ramp up, okay? Now they got this chick. Her name is Catherine, and she's a former maid, so she's not very high up on the hierarchy or anything like that, to a Captain John Cullick. She was also the widow to the town crier or whatnot. So she was born in England, and she came to America around 1651. And I think she's probably having a good time over here, you know, like everybody does, until she became wealthy. Yeah, because the guy she married ended up passing, and so she gets all of his stuff, right? We've seen this time and time and time and time again. She sees his stuff, she gets his stuff, excuse me, and it's not too long that she is basically said that she was a witch, even though all the stuff that she got from her husband, her cattle started dying, her livestock started dying, the stuff in the fields, like everything, all of her stuff her crops were destroyed. So even all the stuff that she had after he died, it still was getting ruined by people that were either jealous or pissed that this woman had more money and more land than them. And so they said, this lady, another lady named Goody, okay, it's like the worst name ever, in my opinion. I'm just saying, her name's Goody Griswold, this one. This isn't the Goody Arias chick. The Arias, like, I'm just wondering. Okay, so anyway, here we go. Poor old Catherine. She has a whole list of things that she did wrong that people love to just point out, okay? And it makes me sad because this is a woman that lost her husband, and you know, it's not like she killed him. There's no thing in there that says she did that. She just happened to inherit his stuff, you know? And people were jealous. And so Goody said that Catherine was slandering her. Okay? So what do? They accuse her of witchcraft. They torture her to get a confession. And what does she say? I'll tell you. Well, she was accused of breaking the Sabbath. She was accused of fortune telling, accused of black magic. She was accused of appearing in spectral form. I want to know who saw that. And was also calling out to the devil and the swamps. Not sure where they got that, okay? So in May 11th, 1669, she was jailed while she was awaiting trial. And while she was there, the first jury did not make a decision. She had like two trials. The first jury couldn't make a decision. And then the second jury found her guilty. The magistrates disagreed with the second jury, okay? They were like, we did not see this spectral whatever vision that y'all saw. We have not seen this. So she was actually released in May of 1670. She was released and banished completely from the Connecticut colony. Like, she could not be there anymore. So she's literally like one of the ones that kind of got away, you know. She stood up for herself. She had the money to stand up for herself, and she did get away in this one witch trial. But unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way for any of the other ones. So another girl named Anne Cole, around the same time that Elizabeth Kelly was having her fits, this chick named Anne Cole started having fits too, and they were like neighbors, okay? And so people were tripping. They were like, oh my gosh, what is going on? I mean, the witch panic was in full-blown panic mode right now, okay? That's when I say the neighbors start pointing fingers, and it's their husbands and wives are put to death. Like, I mean, what? You know what I mean? So 12 were accused, and 11 of them were put to death. Like, a man in their Goody Arias was one. Nathaniel and Rebecca Greensmith, that was another. Andrew and Mary Sanford, they were put to death. All these people, there were so many weird claims. Like, this one lady claimed that all of a sudden the devil made her speak. The devil made her speak with a Dutch accent. Like, make that make sense. Make that make sense to me, because it doesn't make sense. A Dutch accent? Anybody can just walk around and talk like they have a Dutch accent, you know what I mean? Now, mind you guys that with these killings, it did not slow down the sickness. So you would think they would have figured that out, but they didn't. So here we are. Another neighbor said that they saw their neighbors turning into black dogs. Yeah. I mean, I'm telling you guys, these people were coming up with all kinds of stuff. They were saying that they saw these women out in the wild dancing around. You know, of course, there's the naked dancing in the forest, which sounds totally awesome to me. I don't see what the big deal is with that, but hey, here we are. Anyway, so there ends up becoming a guy, and this guy is actually kind of a savior for these people, okay? His name is John Waltham, okay? I apologize, that's my dog trying to go outside. Give me a second. So by 1663, it's starting to wind down a little bit. I'm guessing that people are getting better. They're starting to realize that, you know, just because a family member is sick, the whole family shouldn't go over there to see them. You know, just saying. I didn't let anybody come over to my house when my whole house was full of kids and a full-grown man with flu. So, I don't know. Hopefully they learned the lesson. But anyway, so we're talking about John. And John went through he actually attended a lot of these trials because he didn't want these people to be put to death, because he didn't think that there was enough evidence. Hearsay was the evidence that everybody used in most of these trials. It was just straight hearsay. People making up stuff so that they can sound cool or be in with the group or whatever. I don't know. But they made up all this stuff. And so John, he was the son of the governor of Massachusetts at that time. And he involved himself heavily in the trials to stop the executions. Okay, because he was like, well, obviously these executions, this man had common sense. Obviously these executions are not curing anybody, right? Everybody is still sick. And so what do we need to do? He says they need to bear witness that some of that they have to bear witness to the actual act of the witch. Okay, like he's saying that you need like 1 or 2 witnesses basically to say the same thing if you're going to accuse somebody of being a witch. Which I understand that, because it's better than just going around and saying, okay, this neighbor said they turned into black dogs. Well, this neighbor started talking with a Dutch accent. Them folks over there were dancing naked in the, everybody had a different story. None of them matched. And so that's the thing that John didn't understand. He was like, how are these people getting executed when there's no real evidence to support what any of these people are claiming that these women and men are doing? Because men got the chop too. I'm saying husbands and wives got the chop during this. It was bad. And so I'm kind of glad that this guy stepped in. And there was no more executions after Catherine Harrison's release in 1670. And of course, they told her, go away. We don't need you here. Do not come to Connecticut. Blah, 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 blah. And she was like, okay, that's totally fine, right? And so now everything is slowed down. Nobody else is they're still doing witch hunts. Don't forget that, because in like 45 years from this point, is the Salem Witch Trials. Yes, this is way before the Salem Witch Trials happened. Way before. And so, the first woman to ever be hung for witchcraft in America was Alyse Young. And then it just started its whole ripple effect of a witch hunt. And it just made neighbors turn against neighbors and start saying the most insane things that didn't make any sense. And innocent people got put to death, were hung because of what neighbors said, with no proof whatsoever. Make it make sense. So, our lesson today basically is don't let fear make you make bad decisions or create a false narrative in your head. Okay? That's the whole point of why I talk about these witch trials. Because these are women whose voices can never be heard again. And I want to give them a voice again. And so that's why I always do witches and things like that. But not only that, I am a witch. I've been practicing for over 20 years. And so I just thought I'd share that with you guys. I just think it's very interesting how these women adapted to their surroundings the best that they could. Because at the time, your neighbor can say whatever about you. It's totally fine. And the magistrates would believe it because, of course, the people that are running the trials are ministers. They went autopsy, and they did the autopsy. So they did an autopsy on Elizabeth, and it was the first one that was ever done, really, over there in the United States. And what they found was it was very strange. He said that the whole body was very pliable without any stiffness or contraction. Much of the skin had appeared bruised, and that the throat contained a large amount of blood. The gullet was contracted like a hard fishbone. But He didn't say that Goody Arias was the one that killed her, even though Goody was going around saying a whole bunch of crazy stories and things like that. But I had to go and throw out there about this guy because the Rossier guy is actually a pretty cool dude for doing what he did. And they probably found out a lot medically about it too, as well. That kind of brings us to the end of our story today about the Hartford Witch Trials. The very first witch, Alyse Young, to get hung in the 13 colonies in America, way before the Salem Witch Trials happened. And then we have, of course, the first confession ever made, but it was done under torture. Her saying all those things, you know, that just wasn't true. She was just saying anything to get them to stop. So, but what really stuck with me with this one was the fact that a man actually stepped forward and was like, look, we need more proof than what y'all are providing. You can't just give us hearsay, you know what I mean, and think that everything is going to be okay. You have to actually tell and like show us proof. There needs to be like at least two people that saw the same exact thing that you saw, because everybody gave different stories. They told them whatever they wanted to hear. So what do you do in that situation? Back then, you know, when you're, if you got accused of witchcraft, what do you do? Do you fight it? Or do you just make up something and accept your fate? I don't know. It's a pretty crooked story. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I really enjoyed researching it. I love researching these witches so much. It really does. It's a lot of fun for me. And I hope that you guys are really enjoying it as well. And so I will have another episode up on Monday, and I want to tell y'all what that one's going to be about, but I'm just going to let that one be a surprise, because this is one that I'd never heard of before. And it's going to be very interesting next week. I will say that. So anyway, nobody tells you today, I love you, and I hope you guys have a wonderful week.